And I think he's at his book table, and if someone is... Nathan, if you can hear me out there, we're ready for you. He's getting wired up. Okay, that's good. I've got his notes up here. Would it be a dirty trick if I just took some of his notes out, rearranged them for him?
Is it my turn?
Nathan is with Lamb and Lion Ministry, just a tremendous ministry, great website, tremendous articles. I would encourage you to access their website. And of course, Jan Markell's website, tremendous articles. I mean, we're just so blessed with so much good information that the Lord is allowing us in these last days. So take advantage of that and share these websites and articles with others. And we just trust the Lord that your friends and family will come to know Christ as a result. How many of you came to know Christ through reading Bible prophecy articles or a Bible teacher that was teaching Bible prophecy? Anybody influenced you for Christ that way? One half of you. Okay, that's good. Yeah. No, I was influenced by Bible prophecy, but it's a great catalyst to help people to come to know Christ. Jason, come, Nathan. I almost called you Jason. Come and share with us.
That was a unique introduction. Thank you, Pastor Joe. I'm glad he knows who he brought. Actually, Dr. Egg and I were recording an episode years ago, Christ in Prophecy, and he leans over and says, "So what do you think, Satan?" What would Freud say about that? I have no idea. It's funny, as we've been talking about the Great Reset, there's an awful lot of jokers out there who seem to think that they should rule over us, right? And it kind of reminds me of this story about a CNN news reporter, and it goes like this. It says, with his request approved, the CNN news photographer quickly used a cell phone to call the local airport to charter a flight. He was told a twin-engine plane would be waiting for him at the airport, and arriving at the airfield, he spotted a plane in here. Get some close-up shots. Well, the pilot was strangely silent for a moment, and finally he stammered, "So what you're telling me is you're not my flight instructor?" That's actually kind of an old joke. I was expecting that you all would know that one. Can we switch to my PowerPoint, please? It does seem like these guys who want to take over. Have you seen how Klaus Schwab dresses when he's not at the World Economic Forum? He's like Dr. Evil. He dresses like Anakin Skywalker. These guys are nuts, and they want to rule over us. All right, so we're going to talk more about technology in the end times, particularly how technology is changing our culture. But I do have a few questions for you. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to give you a scenario, and if you feel like you fit in that scenario, raise your hand, okay? All right. Who, in their youth, weaved necklaces of daisies from out of the back of their multicolored VW buses to the radio's pulsating Led Zeppelin tunes? There are a lot of liars out there. Okay. All right. Who spent countless hours devouring MTV and maneuvering a little Italian plumber around turtle shells while Michael Jackson blared out of their oversized boomboxes. Truth. Okay. Now, who endured the pains of tech neck from a life staring down at a mobile device screen filled with a plethora of competing apps while Beyoncé rocked out of wireless earbuds? Really? Okay. I think some of the youth have left since this morning. If you were the hippie in the buses, you come from the part of the boomers generation, 1944 to 1964. Gen X, if you're like me, 1965 to 1979. Woo! Millennials, 1980 to 1988, 98. Boo! And Gen Zs, of my own children, 99 to 2015. And someone asked me, okay, what's the new generation called after that? They're actually calling Generation Alpha. The first generation of the millennium. Could be. Now, it's interesting that every generation has had its distractions, right? Between the hippies and the radids and all these different age groups. And this is a significant thing I want to start with, that no other generation in the past has been subjected to as many distractions as the millennials and Gen Zs of today. Gen Zs in particular have their entire lives, never knowing anything what it was like to live without being connected to the internet 24/7. This characteristic has led Jane Twenge, a professor of psychology at San Diego State University, to label millennials and Gen Zs as Generation Me and iGen, respectively. And after having reviewed 2 studies about classroom attention spans, has led columnist Victoria Barrett to label the children of today as the distracted generation. A great price has been paid psychologically for these endless distractions. Barrett cites a Pew Research Center finding where nearly 90% of teachers surveyed said that digital technologies were creating an easily distracted generation with short attention spans. In a common sense study, 71% of teachers surveyed said that they thought technology was hurting attention spans somewhat or a lot, with 60% concluding that online distractions hindered their students' ability to write and communicate in person. Almost half of the teachers concluded that continual distractions also hurt critical thinking and homework skills. But it gets worse. Though ever connected to their friends over social media, losing in-person human relationships has caused Gen Z to find themselves increasingly homebound, jobless, dislocated, lonely, lethargic, physically weakened, depressant, taking prescription painkillers, and even 35% more likely to commit suicide than previous, less technical generations. And after learning that 44% of high school seniors in 2015 had never been out on a date, Dr. Twenge noted with some worry that it's not an exaggeration to describe iGen as being on the brink of the worst mental health crisis in decades, with the cause being that much of their deterioration can be traced to what? Their phones. She concluded that the twin rise of the smartphone and social media has caused an earthquake of the magnitude we've not seen in a very long time, if ever, and that there is compelling evidence that the devices we've placed in young people's hands are having profound effects on their lives and making them seriously unhappy. This abruptly negative shift in teen behavior towards troubled emotional states, it isn't a localized Western phenomena either, but it's become a global, natural, cultural phenomena. Twenge noted, the arrival of the smartphone has radically changed every aspect of teenagers' lives, from the nature of their social interactions to their mental health. These changes have affected young people in every corner of the nation and in every type of household. The trends appear among teens, both poor and rich, of every ethnic background, in cities and suburbs and small towns. Where there are cell towers, there are teens living their lives on their smartphone. Now, before I go on, I just want to say, your quite initial impression of me might be that I hate technology. I do not. On the contrary, I love technology. I love it all. I mean, after all, isn't technology just applying what we know to fix problems and make stuff, right? Technology is used to fix problems and make stuff. Technology can be thought of as the gadgets and devices we make, but it also includes the technical skills and creativity it takes to invent and forge these tools. And so, I have dedicated the last 20 years of my life to professionally in the information technology world, specifically web development, design, and digital marketing, to ministerially as an internet evangelist, pursuing every technology that can potentially reach people with the gospel of Jesus Christ. We live in a time period like no other where we can share the gospel around the world. The communication technologies that the Lord has provided His church have reached far more people for Jesus Christ than any era before iTech corporate founder Richard Leghorn coined the term the information age back in 1960. Praise God. But as I've said, technology is a double-edged sword. The same social media that keeps us connected to long-lost family members and friends also connects us to clickbaiters and identity thieves and cyberbullies. The same online classes that we take to help educate us from anywhere in the world can also depersonalize the educational process and leave the student learning in a vacuum. News and weather at the touch of the fingertips, which wonderfully warns of impending storms, can also keep us in a constant state of agitation long after the event has passed. The benefits of encountering so many different points of view online can leave one's head spinning in moral relativism and despair. Have you experienced that? Technology and the many devices that connect us provide great benefit to the individual and society, but in the wrong hands, it can produce great harm. The Lord of all evil, Satan, he knows this. He's had a plan going for thousands of years since the beginning of his corrupting influence on humanity, and it continues to this day. The only difference between then and now is that Satan has added technology to his strategy for reaching his insidious goal. So going forward then, I'm going to identify Satan's end goal. What is he trying to achieve? Then we're going to discern his overarching strategy. What is he doing to make that possible? Then finally, I'm going to reveal a number of technologies which our enemy now deploys to help achieve his nefarious objectives. That's the steps. So ready? Satan's goal and strategy. What is Satan's goal? Well, he states it pretty obviously in the book of Isaiah, in a first-person narrative, exactly what Satan's been trying to attempt to achieve. Isaiah 14. I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation on the farthest sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. That's his objective, to be God. And ever since God's guardian cherub and heavenly worship leader began to envy the praise and the worship the Almighty received, Satan has sought to usurp God and sit on his throne. A failed coup d'etat forced the prideful angel to change his plans, and having been banished from heaven and cast down to the earth, if he couldn't rule the universe, then Satan would at least rule over the promised people, God's children, that were made in his image. Satan would corrupt humanity, bending those mere mortals to serve him rather than serve their heavenly Father, and so build his own heinously evil global empire upon their subjugated backs. What strategy does Satan employ in his attempt to reach the sinister goal of establishing his global empire and so garner the praise of mankind? He continues to follow the same 5-step strategy he did way back in the Garden of Eden. Let's go through those steps. Step 1, turn your cell phones off. I've always wanted to say that. Okay. No. The first step in Satan's nefarious strategy to steal the planet Earth from mankind began by, number 1, distracting God's children. Genesis 3 tells the story of how Satan, in the form of a serpent, approached the very first woman, Eve. Hanging down from his perch in a nearby tree, the serpent stopped the woman in her tracks with a simple question, asking, "Has God indeed said, 'You shall not eat of every tree in the garden'?" And the woman replied to the serpent, "Well, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, 'You shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die.'" Right. So God had created and then placed the very first people, Adam and Eve, into a garden paradise. No weeds or thorns or thistles or stinging or biting creatures could be found there. The first couple only had to keep the garden well trimmed and cultivated, name the animals, and keep God and each other company. No want or need existed, for the bounty of the garden was lovingly given by God for them to just pluck at with ease. Every imaginable fruit and grain was at their disposal. The crops grew, and the trees fruited all year long. Only one rule existed in this tropical paradise, and that was for Adam and Eve not to eat from. That's it. That's it. Just one tree. The first couple had even been warned by God what would happen should they eat from that tree. Death. Now, but Satan knows that which is forbidden often becomes the most tempting, right? Even with all the boundless delicacies at their disposal, Satan knows how easy it is to distract mankind with the things which they can never possess. With that one simple question Satan posed, all of the bounties faded away from Eve's sight, and only that solitary forbidden fruit remained stubbornly tugging at her mind. Number 2, first you distract, then you create self-focusing. With Eve's mind distracted away from all she possessed to now only what she could not have, Satan implemented the second step in his strategy to wrest the world away from humanity. He made the humans focus not on their loving God and their countless blessings, but on themselves. In verse 4, the serpent said to the woman, "You will not surely die, for God knows in that day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Satan, bald-faced lie, placed a niggling doubt in Eve's mind. She began to think that, maybe God was holding out on her, and, that maybe he didn't love her and Adam as selflessly as he had claimed, and, maybe even God was jealous of humanity and so keeping them down. Her outward focus on God and her husband became self-focus on what she now believed she didn't have but deserved. Does this sound familiar? Eve began to see her and Adam as victims, dupes even, and a knowing feeling welled up within her for the very first time in her short life. Eve began to envy, and Satan recognized that emotion all too well. Step 3, time to break apart. The story goes on in verse 6 that a distracted, self-focused Eve took a good look at that forbidden tree and found that the fruit was quite attractive, for it was pleasant to the eyes and a tree desirable to make one wise. Purposely ignoring the subconscious voice, pleading with her conscious mind to do not do this disobedient thing, Eve made up her mind. She plucked a piece of the fruit and she ate it. Now Adam enters into the picture. Now we don't know if he was there the whole time or he just come upon Eve and the serpent conversing. Genesis doesn't say. Now some claim that Eve's newfound understanding of the difference between good and evil, the loss of her childlike innocence, had caused her to realize that she had become somehow different than her husband. Maybe even emotionally superior. Regardless, her willful disobedience had broken apart her and her mate. And with this realization, Eve may have used the very first feminine charms to lure Adam to join her in her guilty state. Unlikely, though, because verse 17 places the fall of mankind squarely on Adam's shoulders. We know simply that she also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. And then the eyes of both of them were opened. Now, Eve may have been deceived when she disobeyed, but when Adam disobeyed, he chose to do it with all the facts present. Now, mere moments had passed before Adam and Eve's relationship had begun to break apart. The juice had barely dripped off their chins before they realized with some shock that they were naked. So they ran off with some sewed fig leaves together to make themselves some coverings. The complete openness in their intimate personal relationship was for the first time cloaked from each other. And instead of being an equal partnership going forward, man, the stronger vessel, would dominate woman, the weaker vessel, and all future marriages would suffer some level of gender warfare. God would later in verse 16 explain to Eve this new hierarchy as, "Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." Now, mankind's relationship with their heavenly Father had also been shattered. Verse 8 reveals that for the very first time in their lives, Adam and Eve feared the presence of God, and they even hid from him. And when God at last found their hiding spot, he rhetorically asked the couple how they knew they were naked and why they had disobeyed him. Immediately, the guilty two flung incriminations like arrows and knives at each other. Adam blamed Eve for their sin, and Eve blamed the serpent. In their newly fallen, self-righteous state, surely all three found a way to blame God. So yet another breaking occurred in verse 21, where the Lord God made tunics of skin of the animals to clothe them. Death had indeed entered paradise. The trusting relationship between mankind and the animal world had also been shattered by their disobedience, and much fear and mistrust and blood would be spilled going forward. Step number 4, divide. Satan's temptations had successfully achieved the breaking apart of God from man, man from woman, and mankind from the animal kingdom. Satan had, with almost too much ease, wrestled the title deed of the earth away from humanity. Satan was now the god of this age, and the earth was his. But as soon as the enemy heard the very first baby's birth cry, he realized that he had a whole new problem to contend with: mankind's offspring. The very same pride and lust and self-focused ambitions that fueled Satan and his demonic followers now also fueled mankind. So Satan hadn't created one god to rule over his world, but he ended up creating hundreds, thousands, millions, and soon billions of self-professing gods. Every one of them at some level craved the attention and worship that's meant for God alone. It was bad enough the demonic overlords and his demons clamored for higher positions, but how could he possibly rule the entire world and still have all of God's creation worship Him when challenged by billions of ambitious competitors? The task seemed daunting and the challenge unbeatable. Well, the true solution to Satan's quandary came surprisingly from God himself. Mankind must be kept divided. Genesis 11 reveals that in only a few generations from Noah, mankind had yet again set their hearts against God's authority and sought to establish their own rule. All of Noah's descendants gathered as one in the land of Shinar and began to construct a tower that would stand as a monument to mankind's disobedient refusal of God's command to spread out into the world. Verse 4 reveals humanity's wayward intention. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city, and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth." So God had recognized that what humanity could not do alone, they could certainly achieve if they all worked together. As God surveyed the construction site, the Trinity conversed with themselves, concluding in verse 6, "Indeed, the people are one, and they all have one language, and that is what they begin to do. Now, nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them." Isn't that an interesting thought? When all humanity gets together, we can accomplish almost everything. But God knew that dividing humanity would slow their progress, and so He came up with quite a clever solution. What did He do? Confuse the languages. Clever, huh? After hours of futilely attempting to communicate with each other, I imagine by waving their hands around and heated arguments, there's probably fistfights breaking out all over the place, those who could make sense with each other congregated together under one language each. And the divided people soon migrated off to the ends of the earth, and they became the forerunners of the ethnic peoples and nations that we have today. The combination of linguistic confusion and greedy hearts would bring about millennia of endless wars and ongoing division. Mankind's dreams of wrestling back the title deed of the earth grew frustrated and reached impossible. Well, yet another division arose when a man named Abraham came on the scene that would keep humanity further divided. Now, back in the garden, before Adam and Eve had been expulsed out of paradise and into a cursed land, God had presented the serpent with a tremendous prophecy. He declared, "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed, and he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." Not only would mankind be divided by language barriers and soon ethnically along racial lines, but also between those who surrendered their lives to faithfully follow God and those who followed Satan's rebellious path. The unfaithful would be separated from the faithful, God's enemies versus God's children, and Satan's followers pitted against God's disciples. Under the old covenant, it was the Gentile world pitted against the Jewish nation. And then under the new covenant, the entire world against the church. Step 5. Now it's time to globalize. So Satan's strategy began by distracting humanity with perceived wants, then redirecting people to focus only on themselves, selfies, resulting in a breaking apart of vital relationships, and then dividing humanity so they not join together and so attain the power and praise which Satan so lustfully desires. So the fifth and final phase of Satan's strategy to achieve both world domination and mass worship ends with globalization. Now, Satan has spent many long centuries anxiously waiting for a means to be at last developed that would make possible the ability to regather the warring masses and then reprogram humanity under a whole new unifying culture and ethos, his ethos. This newly shared culture and immorality would bring about a false sense of harmony that would result in a reunification of the discordant nations. But all under his global governmental control. Satan seeks to establish a new world order. The Bible, especially the book of Revelation, reveals that Satan, in the not too far distant future, will be wildly successful in implementing his new world order, though not all by his own efforts. God at first interferes in the affairs of Satan and man yet again by removing his restraining influence, and he does so by doing what? The rapture of the church, the restraining influence of God, is removed from society when the church is removed. Then we, Christians who are alive and remain, shall be caught up, raptured up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and there we shall be with the Lord forever. 1 Thessalonians 4:17. So the shocking removal of all the Christians from the planet will plunge the world in abject terror and a descent into spiritual darkness. You think it's bad now? Wait till you remove the restraining influence of the church out of society. The far leftist progressives will have total control with nobody to hold them back. So with no church to hold back this darkness, every evil inclination will be let loose from people's hearts. Every foul deed will be done with maniacal glee. Anarchy and lawlessness will abound. Chaos will ravage the divided old world order. Now, the mystery of lawlessness that is already at work in this world will at last reveal itself. Out of the old world order, a new world order will rise. Out of the lawlessness, the man of lawlessness will come forth. Satan will present his own chosen one, who will ascend as if as a Messiah by giving false promises of peace and safety to this chaotic world. The prophet Daniel in chapter 9 described this supposed man of peace who shall come will confirm a covenant with many for 7 years. And along with political peace, he will also offer up a new religion, a mystery Babylon religion, to unite the world religiously. The mask of peace will merely be a facade, though, for the peacemaker will quickly reveal himself to be a warrior, a beast, a global tyrant. As the second seal judgment so tragically portrays, the Antichrist will bring war to those who refuse to bow to his rule, resulting in a staggering death of a quarter of the world's population. Oh. Sorry, fell over. I didn't want to drown the podium here. Okay, let's pick up. In the middle of Daniel's 77 years of prophesied tribulation, Satan, through his Antichrist, will have last subjugated all the nations of the world except Israel. The world ruler will then break his covenant with Israel by opposing and exalting himself above all that is called God or that is to be worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. 2 Thessalonians 2:4. In doing so, the Antichrist will establish his own high priest, the false prophet, and he shall bring an end to the sacrifices and offerings made to God in a newly built Jewish temple. In committing this blasphemy, Satan will, through the Antichrist, kill the mystery Babylon religion, and he will replace it with his own religion, open Satan worship. The false prophet will construct a living image of the Antichrist and require all of the world to fall before it and worship it. Those who survive the wars and God's reigning judgments will then be required to take a loyalty mark either on their right hand or forehead that displays the Antichrist's name or the number of his name, which is 666. All must worship the Antichrist or by the false prophet's hand, be cut off from commerce and so starved, be immolated in flames, or sentenced to beheading. And so after thousands of years of human history, Satan during the coming tribulation will have at last achieved worldwide dominion and global worship. His strategy successful, his goal achieved, and anyone who resists and refuses to comply, such as the Jewish people and the post-rapture converts to Christ, they will face a massacre. Sobering. So we've identified Satan's end goal, the usurping of God's rule over the entire earth and the theft of mankind's worship that was meant for God alone. And we have learned what Satan's 5-part strategy entails, ending with a new world order controlled by a government, global government, and a forced religion. Well, now we're going to step back and look at the means by which our enemy will implement his new world order. a means he has so long desired, the building of another proverbial Tower of Babel. This great unifier, which has taken centuries to build and which in our day has at last been achieved, which wields the awesome power in one hand to corrupt a society, while on the other hand redefining and reuniting it, which deconstructs the mind of man yet transforms them into living in a brave new ethos, Satan's means is technology. So I'm going to contend here that in order to subjugate a people on a worldwide basis, to take captive and then bound them to the spirit of the Antichrist who wants to enslave all of humanity under the coming regime of the first beast of Revelation 13, can only be achieved by the implementation of certain key technologies. These key technologies, when combined, quite specifically, form one simple device. This pinnacle of technology will culminate into the ultimate mind-altering mechanism, which is even right now being used to capture the minds and hearts of mankind, particularly the youth. That ultimate, all-encompassing, mind-altering device is what? The smartphone. Now, Nathan, you sound like a nut. I'm going to make that argument that I'm not a nut, but that we have a serious problem. Just go to the mall. Which ones are still left open? And you'll gain an understanding as to why the smartphone has become Satan's predominant device towards achieving his long-desired New World Order. So we're going to have to explore the underlying technologies which make the smartphone possible. Now, the smartphone as a technology doesn't stand alone, but rather it exists like the spider in the middle of a web of many other technologies. The smartphone isn't just one technology, but the culmination of many, many technologies, all layered and integrated, much like the many cells, organs, and systems that make up the human body. So we're now going to explore 6 vital categories of technology that make Satan's globalization strategy possible. Now, bear in mind that identifying an explanation of each of these technologies would constitute an entire book. Therefore, I can only provide a cursory example from each category while expounding on those that provide key technological components that specifically aid in the creation of Satan's New World Order. And you remember, I love technology, right? I don't have a beef against cell phones, but we're seeing what it's doing to society. So the first 2 categories of underlying technologies can be electrical power and computers. They could be classified as infrastructure. These 2 technologies provide the basic underlying framework and features for the overall system. Now you're going to recognize that these as foundational to all of our modern day devices, and without which we'd be propelled as if by a steam locomotive back into the industrial age. Category number 1, electrical power. Ever since Ben Franklin attempted to catch a lightning bolt with a kite and a key, mankind has known that advancing society would require the harnessing of electricity. After all, who could imagine today's technology without electricity? I think the pastor was talking about earlier that you guys lost power here. Someone hit a telephone pole. Couldn't turn on the lights, couldn't have services in the evening. You know what it's like when the power goes out. We'd be back to windmills and water wheels and coal fires. Only briefly a history, back in 1831, Michael Faraday created the very first viable electric dynamo. Leading American inventor Thomas Edison and British scientist Joseph Swan developed the direct current system, which in September 1882 provided the power to illuminate the first New York electric streetlights. This soon led to Serbian-American electrical wizard Nikola Tesla to work with alternating current, or AC, powered motors. George Westinghouse purchased and developed Tesla's patent AC motor, propelling first American society and then the world into a future powered across interconnected electrical grids by AC. Staying plugged into an electrical socket isn't always convenient though, right? Electricity needed to be stored and made mobile. In 1800, Italian physicist Alessandro Volta first discovered that particular chemical reactions could produce electricity, and so he constructed an early electric battery called the voltaic pile. Now, today's inventors, such as Elon Musk, have continued to perfect the battery, even producing and manufacturing one as the $13,000 Powerwall, which can power an entire house for 7 continuous days before needing to be recharged by AC or solar tiles. So whether your device is powered by AAA, AA, D, whatever batteries, portable electricity allows us to have technology on the go. Category number 2, computers. So mankind, like much of our technology, continually seeks to be upgraded. Can anybody tell me what the first computer was? Go back farther. Even farther. I heard somebody back there, somebody give him a free magazine. So to aid our brain's computational compatibility, the first computer, the abacus, was created to help perform basic arithmetic operations. Well, the harnessing electricity led to development of vastly more powerful computers to perform electronically and process a far greater number of calculations in far less time. By the 1940s and 50s, the first general-purpose electronic computer, ENIAC, right, very good, utilized thousands of vacuum tubes, crystal diodes, relays, resistors, capacitors, plug boards, and switches. It took up 167 square meters, it weighed 27 tons, and consumed 150 kilowatts of power. And here is my laptop. With the invention of the transistor replacing the vacuum tube, computers began to shrink in size. And the invention of the integrated circuits, also known as the microchip, led to much more manageable mainframe and then personal computers. Created in the 1970s, the first single-chip CPU or microprocessor was the Intel 4004. The microcomputer was born. Over the last few decades, I've seen computers move at almost light speed away from blinking lights and punch cards to graphical user interfaces, complete with monitors and keyboards and mice and touchscreens, which make them so much more easy to operate. Incomprehensible binary machine code made up of ones and zeros had been augmented by coding language such as Fortran, COBOL, BASIC, MS-DOS, C++, Java, and Perl, and I do know a few of those. And they are hard. And there's armies of programmers to create billions of lines of computer software, which is the DNA of computers. Software has made possible graphics-operated-based systems such as Windows, Mac OS, and OS X. Evolving computers become much more user-friendly and therefore more desirable to the general public. Ever-increasing, near limitless terabytes of data can now be stored on servers and server farms known as the cloud. Yes, ooh, where's the cloud? The cloud is just a bunch of servers in a basement somewhere, but it sounds better. Computers have also become smaller and lighter, resulting in laptops, PDAs, cell phones, and tablets. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, made smart devices all the rage. And now people wear their computers on their bodies in the form of smartphones and watches and other MP3 playing devices. And as computers have become much easier to use and cheaper to buy, billions of people have scrambled to purchase electronic devices, filling their houses and their lives with portable technology. Statistica reports that as of 2020, the average person owns how many computers? Almost 7, 6.58. I guess the 0.58 is the broken one. But that's how many people have. And it adds up to nearly 50 billion devices operating worldwide. Now, computer processing speeds are also continue to accelerate, and they double every 18 months, known as Moore's Law. This is just one manifestation of the greater trend in how all technological change happens to be occurring at an exponential rate. By 2023, in the next year, computers are expected to process at the speed equivalent to the human brain. By 2045, in a mere quarter of a century, Moore's Law predicts we will possess computers with the computational ability equivalent to the entire human race. And computer scientists, folks, are even looking past those goals, pursuing artificial intelligence, or AI, quantum computing, and robotics at a frantic pace. They foresee a time in the not-too-distant future when computer advancement will reach what they call the singularity. Sounds ominous, the singularity. But that means the moment when a civilization changes so much that its rules, when it changes so much that its rules and technologies are incomprehensible to previous generations. In other words, you don't understand what's going on today. And your kids have a division with you because they are working in different technologies that you don't understand. Science fiction writer Werner Vinge, who populated the idea of the singularity back in his 1993 essay, Technological Singularity, wrote, "We are on the edge of change comparable to the rise of human life on Earth. The precise cause of this change is the imminent creation of technological entities with greater than human intelligence." In other words, mankind has been attempting to create artificial life. The rise of computer hardware and software companies such as Xerox, IBM, Toshiba, Apple, HP, Fujitsu, and Microsoft have grown into international behemoths. These Fortune 500 mega companies wield enormous power over the world's economic, cultural, and political realms. Today's companies control the future of the human race. Category number 3, communications. So the author of the book of Ecclesiastes once wisely noted that a threefold cord cannot quickly be broken. So then, what's better than work with one computer working alone? Well, how about 3, or 300, or 3 million, or even better, 3 billion devices all working together? Hence, we've come to our third vital category of technologies, which comprise the smartphone, and that's communication technologies. This category constitutes a vastly mind-numbing array of various technologies encompassing everything from print and audio and video, radios, transmitters, television, cell towers, satellites, cables, cameras, Wi-Fi, fiber optics, and the complicated infrastructure that connects all of these technologies into one massive network provide just the tip of the communications technological iceberg. Now, the true genius came about when all these technologies began to be linked together some 60 years ago, initially as a weapon by the United States to combat the Cold War. We call it the internet today, but this wonder of modern day life was birthed as a means for scientists and researchers to communicate and share their computer data across vast distances in their efforts to combat communism in the world. As soon as the Soviet Union launched the world's first man-made satellite named Sputnik, it's just fun to say, Sputnik, into orbit on October 4th, 1957, a spook U.S. federal government quickly formed NASA and ARPA, and these agencies would wage the Cold War by developing space-age technologies that would lead the world into the digital age. Much like to many today who are concerned that an EMP blast will destroy the nation's electrical grid, military experts in the 1950s worried that a few missiles could take down the whole network of lines which make efficient long-distance communications possible. And so in 1962, a scientist at ARPA by the name of J.C.R. Licklider proposed his solution. He was going to build a galactic network of computers that could talk to one another and enable government leaders to communicate even if the Soviets destroyed the telephone system. So on October 29, 1969, Skynet was born. No, I mean the two house-sized computers. You know that this is where it's going, right? No. 2 house-sized computers, one at the research lab at UCLA, and the second one at Stanford University, shared their first node-to-node message, which read, "Log in." The internet was born, well, not quite yet. It was called the ARPANET at the time. By the end of 1969, the 2 computers linked together became 4, and throughout the 1970s, more and more military and research computers all around the world were identifying each other by IP protocol and sharing their data. Then, in 1991, a Swiss computer programmer by the name of Al Gore, Tim Berners-Lee opened up the burgeoning connectivity to the general public over what he called the World Wide Web when he created the first web server and website. Now anyone with a personal computer can access the web over browsers such as Mosaic, Netscape, Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, and Safari. And with such massive amounts of data being shared, as millions of new computers are being connected to the internet every day, search engines such as Google, AltaVista, Ask Jeeves, Yahoo, and later Bing mapped and indexed all of that data. A world of information is literally at anyone's fingertips via their desktop or mobile device. As of 2020, 4.54 billion of the almost 8 billion people in the world are connected by the internet, and 4.18 billion of them utilize a mobile device. In the United States, 100% of 18 to 29-year-olds, 97% of 30 to 49-year-olds, 88% of 50 to 64-year-olds, and 73, 3 out of 4, 65 and older, are web surfers. The average internet user spends 6.5 hours a day online, generating 88,555 gigabytes of internet traffic every second. The average smartphone user will spend 3 hours and 49 minutes every day on their device. dedicating 90% of their time to downloading any of the 5+ million applications or apps from the leading app stores such as Google Play, Apple's iTunes, and Amazon. Truly, the internet over smartphones has developed today's Tower of Babel. Do you see it? The internet is the new Tower of Babel. Language barriers are even becoming a thing in the past as translation apps, such as Google Translate, have been developed to turn one's smartphone into a Star Trek-like universal translator. The networks are getting faster and more robust as fifth-generation 5G technology is being implemented at a record speed to keep up with the exabytes of data being shared. And the internet continues to expand into its third phase, seeking to encompass every device from your coffee maker to your pacemaker to your car to the Internet of Things. Alphabet, the parent company which owns Google, has risen to become a monopoly, channeling how much? 92% of the world's searches and 44% of all emails generated are generated through Alphabet. And it now decides who sees what information. Cries of internet censorship, especially from Christians and conservative viewpoints, are on the rise. And as television fiction writer J. Michael Straczynski quoted through one of his characters, "He who controls information controls the world." Sign number 4, e-commerce. Well, like most inventions, the internet really didn't take off until businesses began to realize that there was money to be made off, and end users, how they could buy stuff more easily, right? The buying and selling of products and services had to move beyond the brick and mortar and into the electronic realm of online shopping. This now leads us to the fourth vital category of technologies which comprise the smartphone, and that's e-commerce technologies. Electronic commerce, or e-commerce, had its humble beginnings back in the 1970s with the electronic data interchange and telescoping. 1979, Michael Aldridge in the United Kingdom, he connected a modified television via telephone line, and he set up his first business-to-business solution. The internet began to pick up speed in 1991 as Bookstacks Unlimited, now known as Barnes & Noble. There you go. Barnes & Noble. Yeah, now Barnes & Noble barely own anything, right? But at the time, Bookstacks Unlimited was the king. Then Amazon. Anybody have an Etsy store? It used to be the thing. Etsy, eBay quickly became popular as the go-to online shopping experience. To further consumer confidence as online shoppers worried about losing their financial data to the growing threat of hackers, Secure Sockets Layer, or SSL, was released in 1994 to secure web browsers and protect users' financial data. The new trust in online shopping swung the boom away from buildings into economic or e-commerce websites. Now, many long-lived shopping chains, such as Sears and JCPenney's, too slow to adapt to the online model, quickly found themselves facing bankruptcy. A seismic shift in commerce transformed the world in just a few short years. And with the rise of e-commerce came the rise of online banking, with soon cash gave way to electronic funds and new currencies such as Bitcoin. Global commerce companies such as PayPal, which began services in 1998, Authorize.net, and others, provide transaction services across all the economies and currencies to billions of people worldwide. As entirely cashless societies are being considered, Sweden is leading the way. Next year, next March, they plan on being all digital, no more cash in Sweden. And concerns are growing about how much power banks now have over people's finances. For every transaction, banks and transaction services, they get a cut, and so have grown tremendously wealthy and influential. Increasingly, stories are emerging of banks and transaction entities, such as PayPal, cutting people off from their finances over ideological disagreements. Once a society goes cashless, a person can easily be separated from their assets by the order of a government or a bank with the mere push of a button. Online shopping has increasingly gone mobile. In 2010, payments platform Square allowed small businesses to accept debit and credit cards over mobile devices, so that by 2017, Square's gross payment volume was $17.9 billion. Since then, more than a third of U.S. e-commerce sales have been made over smartphones. The top 100 online marketplaces sold $203 trillion in goods in 2019. 47% of all shopping will be done over mobile devices. And just like the computer and the internet tech giants, online shopping giants such as Amazon, which alone sold over $275 billion in goods in 2019 have risen to an almost monopoly status with no entity available to stop them from censoring merchants who depend on Amazon as practically their only place of market. Category number 5, entertainment. So this now leads us to the 5th vital category of technologies which keeps people addicted to their smartphones, entertainment applications. Online entertainment takes the form primarily of streaming videos, which include long and short form video, gaming, and social media. Today's society is visually driven. 65% of people learn visually. In today's world of technology, advanced and high-speed communications, many technologies drive visual learners to on-demand and streaming video. Anybody use any of these services? No. I got Disney Plus just to open the Disney Vault, and I was kind of disappointed once I did. Today's advanced communications technology provided a boom in what is known as long-form produced video by the film industry. As media culture expert Steve Turner notes, film supplies more widespread cultural references than any other art form, and movies provide a shared reference point. This is key. Film and movies provide an unparalleled opportunity to connect to an increasingly visually driven, story-oriented culture and then reshape it to the storyteller's point of view. Well, to meet the rapid appetite of all things video, streaming companies, Netflix, Hulu, HBO Go, Disney Plus, Amazon, Prime Video, Sling TV, Crackle, you name it, have risen in prominence. Streaming devices connect to one's smartphones and televisions like Apple TV, Kindle Fire Stick, and Roku, and Chromecast. Through mobile apps compete to make cable box companies fearfully contemplate their industry's impending demise. For only a few dollars a month, subscriptions to these services open up vaults of libraries and films and movies. The advent also of what's called short-form video, meaning video that runs a few minutes in length, allows amateur film producers to get on as well. Pastor Craig Lozalzo notes that this media is perfected for engaging with the mosaic style of thinking used by postmodernists, meaning they draw conclusions from seeing the parts rather than see the whole, because they are a soundbite-driven culture who have neither endurance nor lengthy attention spans. Does that sound familiar? And where can one find short, professionally yet widely accepted short-form video? YouTube, and increasingly TikTok. YouTube's the most popular online video platform in the world. As one marketing expert cleverly noted, YouTube is the future of entertainment. It has been for years now. My children live on YouTube. They don't even watch regular TV. Some 2 billion users, almost a third of the world's population, access YouTube every month. Some 79% of internet users claim they have a YouTube account or access videos available in 80 different languages. 90% of US internet users between the age of 18 and 44 access YouTube. Gen Zs have also been dubbed the YouTube generation. And for this rising generation, the standard half-hour schedule of television is just a relic of the past. The YouTube generation uses their smartphones to hop from one short video to the next to consume a mere portion of 720,000 hours of video uploaded every day to YouTube. Countless hours every day are devoted to YouTube video consumption. And increasingly, Christian and conservative content, such as what conservative spokesman Dennis Prager, PragerU produces, and lost a lawsuit defending, by the way, are increasingly coming under censorship as Google decides what people should and shouldn't watch. We also have the online gaming industry. It's taken the world by storm, having steadily transitioned away from console devices such as Xbox and PlayStation to the smartphone. Gaming apps such as Pokemon Go, Minecraft, Snapchat games, and Hearthstone engage primarily males in their massive multiplayer online role-playing games across top countries. What are the top gaming countries in the world? Does anybody know? Will you believe it's Germany? There are more online gamers in Germany, then Japan, then the US, then Singapore, and then South Korea. And according to one 2019 Forbes poll, gamers are playing on their smartphone an average of 7 hours a week, but that's been increasing by 25% every year. The global gaming community transcends national borders. They live within virtual worlds and sharing common experiences and speaking in common vernacular. And if Zuckerberg's Meta takes form, people will live inside their games. Along with video watching and gaming, social media is at an average of 2 hours and 24 minutes per day spent with one smartphone, multi-network across an average of 8 social networks and messaging apps. Active social media users, primarily female, have passed the 3.8 billion mark on popular platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Pinterest, WeChat, Instagram, LinkedIn, and all those others. 83% of 12 to 15-year-olds own their own smartphone, and social media, they've been polled, has become the primary means of communication amongst youth, even, preferably alarmingly, over in-person communication. Our youth are only talking to each other over their smartphones. Sixth and last category, communication, security. This sixth and last vital category of technologies inherent in the smartphone involves security measures. These are the technologies that on the surface are meant to keep the individual safe, but in reality are about keeping society safe. There are those security software packages and firewalls which protect phones from the ever-increasing threat of cyber warfare and identity thieves. But there's also those hyper-advanced technologies that continually track where a smartphone and hence the smartphone's user is at all times via GPS global positioning system tied to satellite-based radio navigation and tower pinging tied to cell phone tower locations. GPS very conveniently has replaced the paper map. I haven't used a paper map in years, but our phones know exactly where we're standing at any moment, even when they're turned off. Location tracking constantly sends data back to big tech companies such as Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, and then unknown third parties. In order to target you with mobile ads, your data is given to them. You're permitted them to track you through your data sharing policies. You agree? Did you read those data sharing policies? No, you just clicked accept, right? You could be giving away your first child. You don't know, but they're buried in there. And Apple even tracks personal calls, emails, and texts, what they say, to prevent fraud and to rate the owner with a trust score. Personal privacy left the building as soon as lost online privacy did. Now, these security technologies also conclude the Orwellian realized world of constant monitoring via cameras, microphones, and smart assistants such as Siri, Amazon Echo, and Google Home. And folks, they are ever listening. For example, ever since 2014, when Amazon unveiled the Echo speaker featuring Alexa, its voice-activated virtual assistant software, armies of low-paid Amazon employees have been listening in and transcribing people's conversations, often gleaning very personal security information. And folks, this is not just one isolated instance by one company, but has been reported across all tech companies under the banner of improving their services. And when totalitarian governments get involved in security monitoring, you get what's called China's social credit score. Folks, that is the closest we have today to the Antichrist mark of the beast system, is China's social credit score. Already been instituted in their more popular cities. China's communist government has infiltrated millions of cameras everywhere in order to spy on their citizens. Computer algorithms then rate the citizens' allegiance to their government, granting benefits to those who are more loyal and restrictions to those the computer deems as not being patriotic enough. Many other countries are interested in adopting China's system, and it inevitably will be worldwide. And as home security systems and home devices become more smart and interconnected by the Internet of Things, with the master controller being one's smartphone, the threat grows of a shady outside entity being able to gain control and monitoring one's own home with their very own security system. How many of you own the Ring? Amazon's Ring doorbell camera was discovered being monitored by company engineers for unencrypted live video feeds. Amazon even wants to tie their Ring doorbells into facial recognition, and they have allowed the police forces to use them as home cameras as part of their own surveillance network. The very home security devices that keep the robbers out can also keep the homeowners monitored in their own monitored prison of their making. Let's tie this all together. What does this all mean? I've been presenting the argument that Satan's final step towards realizing his goal of world domination and global adulation rests on globalizing the world under his new ethos and culture. Theology professor William Edgar defines culture as something like a key to the beliefs and customs of a particular society with a view to changing them. With the advent of today's vast technologies, the pinnacle being the smartphone, Satan has found the perfect device in which to mold his new unifying ethos and culture. So what then characterizes today's brave new culture? Media expert Steve Turner would characterize it as pop culture, and notes just how vastly it suffuses just about every part of the lives in people all over the world. He warns that the driving spiritual forces behind much of pop culture are intent on altering the perceptions of the outgoing culture, often negatively towards the Bible, God, and Christianity. He says, when we suspect that culture has an agenda, we're naturally more guarded. But when we think that it's only there to tickle us, we roll over and start purring. We are vulnerable to spiritual corruption when not alert. The result has been a transition from our society away from a historical, modernist, logic-based thinking to postmodernist, relativistic, feelings-based, post-Christian era. Evangelist expert Rick Richardson describes the characteristics of this brave new postmodern world as including a common belief that people are their own gods. They often engage in identity politics. They are rampantly distrustful of authority. They hold a general belief that love rules. They have an overt fear of the patriarchy. They readily discard whatever came before, and today tend to view Christians as self-serving. Folks, this is Satan's new ethos. Carefully indoctrinate the masses worldwide by their ever-present and ever-watching smartphones, thus creating a new global government. The Bible prophesied this in 2 Timothy 3. But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the form of godliness, virtue, but denying its power. Pro-humanist, anti-Christian, having the form of godliness but denying its power, the end of days culture that Paul warned Timothy has at last come. These deniers of the one true God, Paul promised, folly would be made manifest to all. But you, Christians, know the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith, which is in Jesus Christ. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. I'm going to take a break here in a moment, but first of all, I need to get your loving faces here. Bless you. You're all wonderful. Thank you. I just want to ask you, before you leave today, we got a couple more sessions, but we want to make sure we get your names and addresses and email addresses and phone, text numbers so that we can keep
Monitoring us.
Yes. This is called Christian monitoring, right? So we can keep you up to date. Our prophecy conference website, we want to turn into more of a putting good articles like Nathan's, what he's been teaching on here, and Jan Markell's, and so to keep that up, so we'll send that information out to you. But we need to make sure we have your emails. And for future conferences, it's good to have that. You can access this conference after the conference at our YouTube site or web Facebook site. That is, I think you can, because after some things that have been said today, we might be booted off. I don't know. Yeah. But just type in Calvary Chapel, Indiana, and either one of those search finders, and you'll find us. But make sure you put not Lafayette, Indiana, but Indiana before Lafayette. So it's just Calvary Chapel, Indiana, and you'll find us. Or it's on the information, the conference site. It's there as well. Let's see, I got a couple other notes here. The next session is going to be really, really informative because we have Levi Brinkerhoff, a pastor and missionary who has just returned from Ukraine. He'd been serving there as a pastor, his family, for several years. and they escaped the bombs and other things that were going on in Ukraine. It took them a few days to get out, trying to find alternative safe routes out. He's going to be sharing with us. You got to hear him, and if we have time, we'll have some questions for him. Also, Operation Exodus is out in the foyer there. Great ministry, helping Jews return to their homeland. And so their ministry is out there, as well as all the other speakers have something out there. So God bless you. Let's take about 20 minutes. We're running a little bit behind time, but we'll make up time in the air, so don't worry about it.